Since have no genetic data if we find a single unique fossil specimen, how likely is it to be a new species versus a runt offspring?
Okay, I'll throw something in then. Anybody else? If you look at the history of dinosaur names, and Craig's out in dinosaur country in Australia at the moment, out at Longreach. That name's got nothing to do with dinosaurs. That's named after the local river where the town is situated on the long reach of the river. So what you'll find is when you look at dinosaurs and you get the Encyclopedia of Dinosaurs, the number of groups in the dinosaur family has gone up, down, depending on what we call lumpers and splitters. So Diane, take over. What do we mean by lumpers and splitters?
Lumpers and splitters. Well, we have to remember the classification system is actually something that we have imposed on the living world. God made things according to their kind. So in the original creation, yes, there was serpent kind and there was lizard kind, right, which was one of the kinds of reptiles. And they are still recognizable as separate kinds, which is why legless lizards are called legless lizards, even by the evolutionists. No one is claiming that they are turning into a snake because of those differences in their head structure and their jaw structure. The legless ones retain that. So that's why they're classified as lizards. So things weren't multiplying after their kind. The word that is used there in the Greek version of the Bible is actually a word that we're familiar with, genus, which we use in the classification system. But human beings like to organize their knowledge of things. So when we looked at the world around us, we like to organize things according to, well, this group and that group have a lot of things in common, so we'll put them together in a category that's different from this other group, which is a bit like those ones, but it has a lot of differences. And so we organize our knowledge of the living world according to differences and similarities. And that's where it becomes complicated as to what significance do we give to certain similarities and to certain difference. And so that's where the terms lumpers and splitters comes in. Lumpers tend to look more for similarities, group things together. Other people tend to look for differences and say, oh, the differences are more significant than the similarities, so we'll separate these two groups of things according to their differences, and we'll give them different names. So you have split a big group into two small groups. Now, the individual living organisms themselves have not changed. All that's changed are the labels that we have put into them. So remember that with the classification system, it's just a means of organizing our knowledge of the living world that we might understand it. But that doesn't mean that things are evolving into another because we've given them different names. And in fact, the megalodon shark was a good example of that, where it's been given a different name. The titanoboa and the other boa constrictors have been given different names. So that's all.
Well,
it's a good reminder.
I'll take up the last half of Telenomics' question on if you only find one specimen have no genetic data. This has happened many times. You will find that if we find a dinosaur and it's sort of 2 meters long and 0.5 meter high, we get so excited we found a new species. Later on, we find a whole batch of them fossilized together, including the big ones and the little ones, and the little ones turn out to be only the babies of the big ones. So you go back to the drawing boards and unclassify your new species back to the major name. Now, the number of dinosaur species has gone from 700 to 350. Now it's expanding again. So don't be impressed by the number of species out there. That is an arbitrary term. Go closer if you want with genuses, but remember, if you're dealing with fossils, you can't breed them and see where they came from or see where they're going to. Without the genetic data of crossbreeding, you are just guessing, and you need to be honest about that. So I hope that helps you, Telenomics.
Every outback town. Sorry. I was going to say, keep in mind, scientists are human, and one of their main is to get funding, to get publications. And if you develop or find a new species, you've got a publication. And I've seen that in some fields of science that can be fairly prolific. That's true. A publication that's funding. And sometimes it works out later. They come back and refine that. But there is a motivation to finding a new species and classifying something.
Yeah, the other motivation for finding a new species that you have naming rights, so you can name it after yourself if you like, or you can name it after some person that you like, or if it's a particularly ugly sort of thing, you can name it after a person you don't like.
So look up Macaensis if you want to see anything. Craig, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that every outback town in this dinosaur region out here seems to have their own variety of sauropod dinosaur. And all they're really finding at the end of the day is pretty similar bones.
Yeah. And it's just to remember, a reminder that the easiest way to deal with any question that refers to a species is simply ask what a species is, because there is no definitive definition of what a species is. Partially because we know that there's got to be, I mean, if you think of the way that Carl Linnaeus thought, it's a special type of a kind, and there's no doubt about that, there are special types within a kind. But because God created by kind, where do you define which are the special types or not? It's all down to human beings, and even in an evolutionary perspective, you don't have a definition of species because they're supposed to be changing all the time. So until you can define what a species is, you really can't argue whether one has changed from one to another. What we certainly haven't seen is kinds evolving. But anyway.